Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Coming up on The Payoff, Jennifer Leone has a special story and a special message, and it's unique, just like the rest of ours in sobriety, but it's one that really right now is glowing. She just started up JSL Recovery. She's got a podcast called Jenny's Sober Lifestyle. She was a model. She was an actress, grew up in Canada, moved to LA, and it was living hard, living fast, and was brought to her knees by alcohol and drugs. And she's lived life after recovery just like the rest of us, ups and downs. One of those ups includes getting full custody of her son and being 7 years sober. She got sober on my dad's birthday, August 5th, so I can't forget about that. And she's awesome. She's somebody who recovers out loud. She started the hashtag. I'm saying that, not her. And she is part of a movement. We talk a little bit about the fentanyl epidemic, topics like that are extremely important, and topics like sobriety, which of course this podcast is all about and is extremely important as well. So coming up, Jennifer Leone, but first, Kevin Souza.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay,
Can I
cool.
ask you a question too? Because I'm curious about
Ask me
stuff.
whatever you want.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, by the way, so home used to be Canada. Where right now you're in Southern California.
I'm in Orange County. Yeah, Southern California, Orange County. Do you know where that is? Have you been out here before?
Yeah, my brother lived in Hermosa, so I've spent a bunch of time out there.
Yeah. I'm in Huntington Beach.
Okay. Yeah. Familiar.
Surf City. But yeah, I came from Canada. I was born and raised in Vancouver. Have you been there?
I have not. It's beautiful out here.
Yeah, it is. And I came out here at 19. So I've been here for a long time.
Okay. Now, what brought you to California?
I came out here to do a TV show that I'd gotten booked on. And I was, already running and gunning in my lifestyle and out of control, and just thought it would be a good idea. One of my great ideas, impulsively, to just pack a suitcase with no family or friends and get on a plane and come to the States.
And so before we'll get back to your move and your work acting and modeling, but you started to do drugs, I guess, when you were around 12 years old. You said 12 or 13?
Yeah, I was a really young age. For me, I had a lot of childhood trauma. And so that just, snowballed into starting to use things, trying to numb stuff out. And yeah, that started at about 12 years old. So
was there a specific instance you remember? Like I always say, my first spiritual experience was, you could say when I started to drink, like right around high school. But when I was a kid, they put me, and people take doctors prescribe drugs, but this drug affected me differently. Like they put me on Adderall when I was probably in second or third grade. And I can really remember feeling okay, now I'm as good as everyone else. And I chemically felt differently. And it was some sort of change in me. Do you have a memory, a recollection when you took drugs for the first time and they actually worked, or your mind said, okay?
I mean, yeah, there's times when I was younger for sure, but just going off the Adderall just real quick is I had the same experience when I did Adderall. Most of my stuff that I was on were doctor prescribed. But yeah, when I took Adderall or when I took Xanax, it was okay, now I belong. Now I can be social. I can get stuff done. I always felt off, and that I was different than everybody else. And with those things, it's I could do anything, but that wasn't until later. But yeah, at a young age, I think it was probably, the alcohol, and back then it was a lot of acid and party drugs. And MDMA, like Molly and all that, I think ecstasy was probably that for me at a very young age, because, it just hits those endorphins and dopamine and serotonin and all those feel good things. So like everything bad that I didn't want to feel, I could take ecstasy and just feel like I was on cloud nine without a worry in the world, for the whole weekend, And so that was probably that experience for me at a very young age.
How'd you end up doing? One part about your story that I find super intriguing is you're doing psychedelics at a young age.
Uh-huh.
How do you get opened up to that experience?
Honestly, I don't know if it's just where I was raised, but in Vancouver, I was in like a smaller town in the suburbs, and it was everywhere. Like we would just get sheets of acid and mushrooms, ecstasy. Like it was just normal. Like I know it's not normal, but in our little
Sure.
group of kids, it was normal to have that stuff around.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a Canadian thing. I don't know.
Did you grow up in a big drinking culture?
Yeah, I mean, it was the typical, all the moms for the most part, like stayed home, I was in the suburbs. So housewives, moms that, they're drinking all day, having their wine, drinking out in the garage, and, the men are watching sports and drinking. Like it was the social thing to do, to see everybody drinking all the time. Hence the reason why, me and my group of people that I was hanging out with, we all started drinking early too, because that's what we were surrounded by.
Yeah. You mentioned that you felt sort of like I could totally relate, like less than, or like you don't even know you feel less than until you have a drink and you feel like, oh man, I'm all the way there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always suffered with anxiety. I still do. I just cope with it now. I had really bad like social anxiety. And so for me, that really gave me this feeling of like, oh, my anxiety's gone, I can do anything. So it was trying to get rid of that anxiety. And then Xanax came into play, but alcohol was the first one.
How did you end up, were there any consequences for you early on? I think you said you had nobody knew for such a long time that you were addicted to these like hardcore prescriptions. I mean, and they become hardcore for me as an addict. They were hardcore for me because I liked them too much. And I knew even at the time I liked them too much. But then you talk about, which I can relate to, like the doctor shopping or just finding ways to get what you need. There's this, we're so brilliant when we have to figure all this stuff out. Yeah.
We're master manipulators. We're very persuasive when we're in our addiction. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But, I was doctor prescribed. I honestly did not think it was a problem for such a long time. And, it's just, as your tolerance just goes up and up and up. And, it wasn't until probably like 10 plus years in that I tried to stop taking, all the pills. It was Adderall, Xanax, and, Norcos or Roxys or something like that,
Yeah.
Pain medication. And then I tried to stop and was like, holy shit, I can't just stop. I'm going to get sick. This is crazy. And so instead of like thinking, okay, well then what's the healthy thing to do? Let's get some help here. I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to stay on these pills for the rest of my life because I just have to maintain this lifestyle. But yeah, so people didn't really know what was going on with me until it got like really bad, in the sense of like getting really sloppy, like I didn't hang out with drug addicts. I had nice things. I worked. I had a home.
Were you kind of like, did you hang out with people like, I used to do this number, like they never would know that I was like holding drugs or on drugs. And I would just use it all to myself and it was like my like secret for such a long time. And then similar to you, I started to get sloppy and your life goes outside the lines and people start to notice.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure, working in the entertainment industry, I'm sure there was, lots of other people that were doing stuff too. But yeah, I never talked about it with anybody. Nobody knew. It wasn't until like the last 3 or 4 years before I got sober where I started drinking. And when I started drinking, because I wasn't drinking for all those years, I started drinking really young at like 12, 13, drank for a few years, but then stopped drinking altogether. And it was just pills up until, the last like 3, 4 years. And I thought, okay, well, I'll start drinking and I'll be able to, get myself off all these pills. It was a blessing in disguise because I just got so sloppy that I ended up, getting help. But it definitely was a secret that definitely kept me sick. I would isolate. I had my stashes all over the house, different spots that I would keep stuff, and just making sure that I always had my pills and that nobody knew, and that because I would get up and like my son just left for school. He's in 10th grade, but he was in elementary school, and I'm getting him up for school, getting him to school, getting stuff done all day for the most part, because I've taken my little cocktail every morning, and that would go the day. But if I didn't take that cocktail, it'd be a complete disaster. But it was more towards the end, like maintaining, than like really getting messed up.
What were you doing in the entertainment industry? Like, I know you mentioned you acted, you modeled, but like, what was the progression of that? And how did like substance play a role?
Yeah. So I started modeling and acting back in Vancouver before I came out here. And, felt a passion in that. And I wanted to, live the Hollywood dream and become a famous actress or model. And I came out here and started working on a TV show. And then,
What TV show? Can I ask what show?
I mean, there was a few different things I did. I mean, it was this show called Battle Dome, which was like American Gladiators. It went for 2 seasons. I was on like several different like teen movies back in the day, like, little roles.
But you're working.
And
you're working.
Huh?
You were working.
Yeah. Like I was consistently working. I was booking a lot of modeling gigs. But when I look back, like when you're taking the Adderall and the opiates are one thing, right? They get you going, invincible, no pain, all that. But when you take Xanax in like high doses, it really like messes up like rational thinking and logic, right? And like being able to play the tape through and being able to pause, like very impulsive. And so, when I was taking all that Xanax and all this other stuff, it's like I didn't really think about my actions at the time and what I was going to get myself involved with. All I knew was that I wanted to live this like lifestyle. I wanted to have lots of money. I wanted to hang out with celebrities and rock stars, and I wanted a big fat house and a fancy car, right? And
so, I mean, honestly, it's like the American dream. I like, it's not gonna. As a kid growing up, it was the same. I had the same wishes, just maybe like a different avenue there. But that's what I wanted, Yeah.
Right. Little did I know at the time that I was trying to do all these things to fill a void inside me that, I needed to work on when I worked on it in recovery. But I just, I started getting offers to do more adult stuff, like Topless magazines, Playboy, Penthouse, Hustler, like all the companies, right? And so that just progressed. Like the money was fast. It was easy. And I eventually met up with Jenna Jameson. She offered me a contract with a company that she had under Playboy. And I went under contract, and it's like all sense of reality at that point was completely out the window because I'm hanging out with people that don't really have morals and integrity for the most part. Right? And it's just a free for all. So like I said, like probably most people were out there using drugs and doing stuff, but we didn't do it together. It wasn't like a bunch of people sitting in a room doing heroin or something crazy like that. But it was just this gnarly lifestyle where I was just, traveling all over the place and, doing guest spots here and signings here and parties here and hosting events here and photo shoots and acting. It was nuts. And, it's a very odd, uncomfortable feeling getting out of that industry. It's really hard.
Yeah. The adult films.
Well, I was a girl contract star. So I was like the biggest girl contract star out there in my time. And, just living this life. But when you get out of that lifestyle, you have to like find your identity all over again because you're known as an AKA. So I had another name. So nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew the real me. Nobody knew that I was on drugs. And so as you can imagine, trying to get out of that and start over when that's all you've really known is not an easy task.
How do you do it? How do you, and I honestly, like, as I can relate to you in like different ways, like in my past, like drugs would help me do all that stuff. So, like, because it would soothe the ride, right? Like now I actually have to walk through the pain. Now I have to actually, like, whether it's a breakup or a job or whatever, or an uncomfortable situation, it's like, all right, I got to walk through these feelings. But like my initial reaction when I'm faced with something like fearful, like you're talking about, or something that's going to be really hard, I have fear, Yeah. Yeah. So did you use drugs to kind of like move out of it, or what happened?
Yeah, no, there was a series of events that led up to a very traumatic event where I was raped by one of the Playboy executives. And at that point, that was it for me working in that industry. So I retired out of that industry, and then soon after that, decided to get sober.
Yeah.
And, when I got sober, it's crazy because, coming off drugs and alcohol is one thing, but, finding your identity, figuring out who you are, going through all those things, it's a whole other thing, and it takes so long. And so it was a real uncomfortable, painful process. But, while I was in treatment, I'd gone through detox, I'm in residential, and I just had like this aha moment, this like spiritual awakening where I knew it was God telling me, and he put it on my heart that I needed to take everything that I'd been through, all the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, and use it as fuel to help others in one capacity or another and turn all the negative into positive. And I just knew it. There was nothing more clear. It was clear as day. That's what I needed to do. And that's what I proceeded to do. So while I was in treatment, I put myself back in school, and, I humbled myself. I went from, not getting out of bed unless I was making a certain amount of money to like working as an intern at the beginning, making $16 an hour.
That's what I did. I went to rehab. I had some pretty big jobs working in sports, working in the NBA. I went to treatment. I went to a halfway house. They were like, well, you got to get a job. I was like, I'm not getting a job. And they're like, well, if you want to stay and you want to keep on this mission that you have, and I was starting to feel good. They're like, you have to get a job. I worked at a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and I'm in my early 30s, and I'm like, wow, if somebody from my like past life, I remember thinking like, if somebody from my past life were to get off I-95 and come into this KFC in suburban Baltimore, I at that point I probably would have hit the floor. But I did it, and by the time I left the job, I was fucking proud of it.
Oh, it's the most amazing feeling when you actually surrender and have the willingness to really change your life and humble yourself. That alone was huge for me, because when you come from, like both of us, having some stardom and some money and with those circles of people, and then
more you than me, but okay.
But when you have to let it go and start over, it is like a rebirth, I got rid of most of my belongings. I started over in like a little 1-bedroom that I was renting from someone else, because I have my son, but I had my ex, who's now my ex-husband. And, I left our family home. I started completely over again, and here I am seven and change years later. And, it's beyond my wildest dreams, but I had to go through all of that to get here. And that was a good 4, even into the 5th year of my recovery before things really started to turn around for me, in the sense of like, okay, I'm financially secure, but more so than that, just the gifts of sobriety, being able to know what I want, have the confidence, love myself, overcome trauma, find forgiveness, figure out who I really am and what I want. And that's been monumental over like the last couple of years of my recovery.
August 5th, 2016. That's my dad's birthday. So that's how I remember it so well. Cause I was
like, wow, you did your research.
Yeah. So that's when you got sober. This is something that I can't relate to, but some people out there can. When you're somebody that's like a real attractive person and you get sober, right? Like, how does that, when you start to figure out like what really is, like, do people want me for me, or do people want me for the person I am inside, which, by the way, is, you're worthy of all the stuff, but like, you know, in an industry where there's attraction, right? Based on, a lot of it's based on attraction and aesthetics. How important is it to just go right in to sobriety?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like, I truly believe what you put out, you get back. And people are always going to be judgmental. You know, we're human. It's human nature to be judgmental, even if we're even if we're Dalai Lama, if we're the most peaceful person ever, right? Like, we cannot help but have judgments. But, you know, I sit in a space now where I'm comfortable with who I am, and I just show up for myself every day authentically. And when I do that, and I'm just like, this is me, right? I surround myself with the right people. They align with me. And, you know, a lot of people, especially women, because women can be super competitive and catty. Unfortunately, I hate to say that, but it's just the truth. But once they like get past this and see who I am, and the only way I can do that is by just being authentic, then they go, oh, she's super cool, you know. She's just a normal person. And but I think the only way that I can do any of that is to just live an authentic life every day.
When you go through treatment and you are living like a really authentic life, and that is super attractive, like that energy you're putting out there. And when but the road to that is not easy. Like you mentioned, like it wasn't until the 4th or 5th year that, you know, maybe you started to see the gifts kind of, right. Early on, we see the gifts come and we feel them internally, but like outside, I don't know, man, life goes up and down. I'm not quite sure what I'm saying, but you know, life goes up and down on the outside. And sometimes we do get returns on these investments, you know, on the outside. And your return now is like helping other people with your story. And you've really sort of taken off doing this. How have you been able to help other people, women, I'm sure specifically, but dudes too, with your story and with, you know, with exactly who Jennifer Leone is?
Yeah, you know, when I got sober for the first couple of years, I really had this like victim mentality of, you know, oh, you know, maybe that's going to happen for you. And, oh, you talk about this great life and blah, 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 and that's not going to be me. Right. And then over time, I really had to switch my mindset to have the why not me mentality. You know, why can't I have these things? Why can't I live this life? Why can't I be happy and content? Why can't, you know, I live a fulfilling life? And, you know, with that shift, I went from a victim to a survivor, and I embraced, you know, the mindset of I can do anything I want. And so when I started thinking that way, I'm like, okay, you know, I'm going to recover out loud, because if I recover out loud, you know, those that are suffering in silence, you know, I might be able to plant a seed, and I'm going to be relatable to people. And relatability is such a powerful tool. You know, we have therapists and people that can help us, and I've had many therapists have done amazing work with me with stuff that I had to work on, but there's something magical about being relatable, you know, and being
uniquely
able
qualified to help other women going through struggles, right? Like you are.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, like that's like a superpower that we have, really. And I know when shit gets tough, around the outside, for me, I'll go to a meeting and plug in and be like, oh, that's right. This is my purpose. Forget all that stuff. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, you know? And it seems like I know it's what happened for you, because you're telling me. How important was it for you? Because my, and honestly, I didn't have the platform you did. I've developed a little bit of one, but when I got sober, like it really was for me, the only way out of this was pretty much out loud. Everybody knew that I had an issue. Everybody knew that I went to treatment, and then I went to an extended care place, and that I was like living, you know, whatever. I was doing what I needed to do to get well. Like I tell people I wasn't around alcohol, I don't think, for like 18 months, you know? And so that's just I needed. But I was if you knew me, you knew I was sober. Today, if you know me, you eventually within the next hour or two, you're going to know that I'm sober. How important was that for you to just embrace it and just to recover out loud?
I mean, it was everything. It was everything. You know, I had to live it fully, and to some people that stay anonymous, to each their own. But for me, I had to completely be engulfed with recovery and recovering out loud in every aspect of my life. The company that I keep, my mentors, my teachers, my family, my friends, like everybody that's around me knows everything about what I'm going through. And it's for me, I don't know any other way to live but out loud like this in every aspect of my life. I mean, I go talk about it anywhere I go, I talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super important. When you started to get sober, did you start to kind of lift off? Like, were you going to meetings in Southern California? Were you like, what did that look like for you early on? Because a lot of people, men or women, are like, how do I get this shit started? Like, here's Jennifer. She's out there glowing right now. But I know, just like I crawled into treatment, like, how did you start to like take flight in your recovery early on?
Yeah. So when I first got sober, I had a sponsor. I worked in AA program of Alcoholics Anonymous. She actually came and read with me once a week while I was still in treatment. And I did that for a solid year and a half. Went through the steps, which I encourage anybody and everybody to go through the steps, even if you're in recovery or not. They're amazing. And, would go to meetings all the time, had a really good women's support group that I went to, which I thought was like super valuable, and started being of service and, just living a purposeful life. On top of that, I was seeing a therapist and doing really intensive work, trauma-informed therapist, and also EMDR. For people out there that have suffered with trauma, PTSD, I would Google EMDR and check out, maybe that's something you'd want to incorporate. And then just, incorporate also a real spiritual path into my life. And so those three things, those were really important: to work an AA program, to have a strong group of women around me, good support groups, a really good therapist, and just in touch with my spirituality. So
how important was the therapy component for you as you started to grow? Because I'm starting to sink my teeth more into therapy along with my 12-step program with AA. And I'm starting to wish I would have been doing it the whole time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How important was that to sprinkle that on top?
I mean, it was just as important as anything else that I was doing back then. It was in the top things to do. It's like when we're drinking and using, we're just covering up. It's just a symptom of what the underlying issue really is, and so if we don't really get nitty and gritty and dig up that underlying issue and deal with it, then we're never really going to be happy or healed or feel content. We're going to be irritable, restless, discontent, right? And not be our to our best abilities. So I think it's super important that you go to therapy.
How did you? I feel like you're talking to me. Yeah, you go to therapy.
No, in general.
I know.
If you're in recovery, go to therapy.
How did you start to, like, how's your program changed? It sounds like it might have changed a little bit because you said that's what I was doing early on. How is it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do an AA program anymore. I don't have anything against it, but I don't actively work with a sponsor anymore. I maybe go to a meeting here or there, but it's not like feeling like I need to go, every week or anything like that. So I'll just, do it here or there when I feel it's needed. I know when I physically feel certain things now, when I start to feel uncomfortable, when I start to get a little restless, anxious, it's like, okay, time to take a look at this. What's going on? Hit a meeting, get out there and talk to somebody. So I'll do it now when I feel those feelings coming up. And then, therapy, I've been off and on with therapy pretty much the whole time. Like I love therapy. You don't just need to go to therapy when something's wrong. You can go to therapy for like maintenance. And I've seen different therapists for different things, like success coaches and, relationship therapists. And, it's like, there's so many different types of therapy that you can do. And I'm just a firm believer in like always learning and growing in that space, so I'll do it off and on. yeah, the only thing I don't do steady anymore is go to meetings.
When you like as far as when you get sober and you deal with relationships, like I always ask everybody this, like how was that? Because for me, like alcohol and drugs was the ultimate like elixir, and it would totally like was my conduit to in any relationship, like emotional, sexual. How did you sort of find your way there? Because it's something sometimes, Jen, it kept me from getting sober. Like, how am I going to be in a relationship without alcohol? That is what I use to talk to people.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't suggest dating when you're in early recovery, because that can just set you off down a bad road, and a lot of people relapse over that. And I did it, I was dating early in recovery, and I, when I look back, I never should have been doing that. But
matters of the heart. We'll a guy told us this in early recovery at the halfway house. Matters of the heart will get you drunk, dude. Matters of the heart will make you do drugs in early recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've seen it so many times. It's funny because I'm at a point right now where I'm not even trying to get seriously involved with anybody, because I feel like as you get older, well, I'll speak for myself. So as I've gotten older, and I've gotten further into my recovery, like I really know what I want. Right. And so I will intentionally date. And I think when you're like intentionally dating, then it can be done in a way that's more healthy, and it's not just these uncomfortable. I think people like go out on dates all the time and it's like awkward. People drink, right?
Yeah.
Like you think about all the dating, I've never been on any of them, but these dating apps, I watched something where they were saying that like 9 times out of 10, everybody that goes and meets up off a dating app, they're drinking.
Yeah.
Because it's uncomfortable. You know what I mean? You're going and meeting, let's be real, we're human. You're going and meeting someone for the first time. You've met them off this app. You don't really know what they look like. Then you got to sit there and have this awkward conversation. So you know what I mean? So what's going to help? Like having a drink. Yeah. So I think if you can like intentionally date, like maybe you meet somebody at a hobby you like to do, or something like that, where it's you already have that thing in common, or you're going and doing an activity together. I think those kind of things would help a lot. To ease that anxiety and not feel like you have to have a drink, especially if you're going out with people that are normies.
Yeah.
I don't suggest that early on either. I mean, for me, I choose not to be with somebody that's a normie. Maybe at some point in my life I would, but I just don't want to be around somebody that's drinking. Like it's just,
that's your call. You get to, that's the beautiful thing about being sober is empowering. Like we get to choose, we get to be intentional. It's not so flimsy. My lifestyle before, right? Like if I'm in the wind if I'm in the wind today, and making decisions based upon like pleasing others, then I'm in trouble. Right.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So I want to ask you about how you got into working in recovery. I mean, that's a major step, and you've clearly developed like your own brand. And then JSL Recovery, you have the podcast too. When did you start to really figure that out for yourself? Like, okay, not only am I going to go to meetings and tell my story or meet other people through recovery, whatever that looks like, I'm now going to establish myself as somebody who can help people, like get some official stuff behind this.
Yeah, I mean, that actually started when I was in treatment. So when I was in residential, one of the case managers said, hey, well, if you want to help people, then you should go back to school to work in this field. So I went back to school right out of treatment for drug and alcohol studies, got my degree in that. And that's when I started working as an intern at a treatment center with less than 6 months sober. So I worked in several different treatment centers. I was a case manager. I was a therapist. I'm not a therapist, geez, a life coach. I was a group facilitator. I had women's sober living homes.
Are you familiar with a place called Miriam's House?
I've heard of them, yeah.
My brother used to be on their board. He was a sober guy too. Yeah.
Oh, very cool.
He was like all about it, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of worked my way through the industry. And then when COVID hit, I was with a company that I'd been with for a long time. And I thought, you know what, like I have to find another way to connect with people because everybody was at home. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll just start going online. And so I just started going on Facebook, going live on Facebook, right? And because I started this, I've had that Instagram account, but it's been dead for like 2 years, like never used it. And then I only started actively using it like just over 3 months ago. So before that, I was just Facebook, Facebook, Facebook. And so I was going live on Facebook. And then I thought, it'd be really cool to like actually interview other people too. Because when I was going live, there was a lot of people engaging, and I thought it'd be cool to, be talking to these people more and having like a more in-depth conversation. And so that's where it all started, where I like thought, well, I have the acting experience. I'm okay being in front of a camera. Why don't I use all of that didn't work out in the past for something positive now? that's purposeful work, and maybe it'll actually work out now because I'm doing it for the right reasons. And that's what I did. And so over like 2 or 3 years during COVID up until now, I've just been building that platform on social media. I've been using the slogan sober lifestyle and recover out loud for over 2 years. And I've just let it organically manifest into what it is now, which has grown exponentially. And it's so cool now because there's so many people using recover out loud now. And I love that.
Yeah.
I'm not one to say, oh, it's mine, right? The more, the better. And so it's great to see people out there recovering out loud, using that slogan, having a sober lifestyle. And, I get so much positive feedback from people about it. It's amazing.
Awesome. You're like a light. And I'm telling you, I also think this too. And look, I got sober using AA 12 steps. So I'm not here to try to reinvent the wheel or change that.
Yeah.
For me, it is very cool. I got sober because famous people were talking about being sober. I really did. I would see Rob Lowe, or I would see a famous baseball player, this guy Dennis Eckersley, and they would be talking about their struggles and getting sober. This guy Chris Mullen, the basketball player. And I was like, whoa, maybe I can do it. They're doing it. They're talking about it. And honestly, it seems weird, and I don't mean to be shallow, but they seem cool. You seem cool. You got the tats, you're just kind of out there, fuck it. And we need a little more of that out, I think, in sobriety, because I still, what always surprises me, and I want to see if you think this too, is there's still even though we have this movement, Recover Out Loud, and I have a podcast and you have a podcast, and we're really reaching as many people as we can, there's still a major league stigma to it. It still is. And you can be, West Coast, East Coast, Middle America. It's not hard to find somebody who's I heard they went to rehab, or they went, there's something really wrong with them. Yeah, they have a disease. That's what's wrong with them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another reason why I do what I do, is to switch the narrative of that and hopefully break the stigma. I want to show people out there that, number one, you can get sober. Number two, you can get sober and live a life beyond your wildest dreams, and it can be fun. And it's cool, and it's sexy, and it's trendy, and it's all these things, because that's the other thing that people think, oh, I'm going to get sober and then my life is over. I'm never going to have fun again. It's just a bunch of games. Life sucks. And it's no, I want people to see no, you can have this great life and have adventure and amazing people in it and success and all these things, and just really show people that, because that's another stigma too. People really think it's just, oh, well, now life is over. And that will prevent people from getting sober for so long, because they're just a little longer. I want to have fun still.
Yeah. And that can kill you. That extra, I remember before I went to rehab, I was oh, I need a week. And I went back, and I could have died. I mean, it's kind of, I talk about it now and it's whatever, but yeah, I mean, who knows what could have happened? What are some of the, you're dialed in recovery wise, for yourself, for your own, mental health. What's one of the hardest things you've been through in sobriety that you would have never imagined would crop up and you would be able to conquer?
I mean, I'd say the biggest thing that I went through in sobriety was fighting my ex for 2.5 years in family court to get my son back full time.
I heard you mention that earlier on an interview. I was curious. I didn't want to bring up No, I'm an open book. It's all good. But, a lot of people
get very hopeless in that space when, they're trying to get their kids back. And a lot of times they'll relapse over it and just give up and go, fuck, I can't do this because it's so hard. We have this wreckage from our past that we have to deal with in recovery. We have to deal with it now. We have to deal with all this wreckage sober. So like all this stuff. And so, I had to go through that process, and it was extremely painful and extremely uncomfortable. And at times I felt that I wasn't going to get through, I wasn't going to get through. And what was I going to do? And my son didn't want anything to do with me. And, I every day got up and started my day with gratitude. I was humble for my life. And I knew with every fiber in me that if I just kept being consistent every single day, get up, suit up, show up, no matter what, and did the right thing, things were going to work out. And so I did that. And I truly took it one day at a time, which I think if you're going through a really hard situation, really take it one day at a time, or else it can just get so overwhelming that you end up drinking. And, over time and consistency and patience and the willingness to be gentle on myself through the process and have the right team of people around me, meaning friends, loved ones, therapy, support, I was able to get my son. And now my son lives with me full time.
That's all you just said, hey, bye.
Yeah. And we have the most amazing relationship. And he knows that I do stuff like this, and that he can talk to me about anything, and that he saw over time and consistency that I showed up for him, every single day, but I had to show up for myself first. So he saw that.
Yo, that's awesome. So I heard you say something about your son. Talk to people, and this is just a window into drugs. When you had your son, okay, you're a mom, you realize, okay, I got to get off all this shit. Well, what did you do?
Yeah, kids don't keep us sober, and as much as we would like to think that, and I always say I cringe when I say that, but it's the truth,
yeah. But
we
what about when you were pregnant? You tell the story about.
Oh, when I was pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I detoxed when I found out I was pregnant on my own in my bathtub. I'll never forget it. It was like 17 days of pure hell. I thought I was going to die. He ended up being 10 pounds, very healthy baby. So that was,
it was worth it.
But I was so still in that space of being a drug addict that literally I was so excited to get to the hospital to have him, because I knew that I was going to get pain medicine. I was like, oh, this is great. I don't have to not take anything anymore. And literally I just started taking stuff immediately afterwards again. So yeah, but yeah, I detoxed in a bathtub for 17 days.
And so then when you said kids can't keep you sober, I want to go back to that. So you start he's born, and then you're still you fall back into that cycle, right? Of just using it. Were you drinking at this time?
No, I wasn't drinking at all. So, and I was, PTA mom and with my son every day and doing all these things while popping Adderall and Xanax and pain pills all day. That's what it was. And it's, I just wasn't ready yet. I wasn't ready to do the work, and it was
Did
okay.
You have any, did you flirt with sobriety at all? I had this, I always tell people it literally took me, and I wasn't in and out, but I had moments where I would get sober for 90 days, and then people will be passing around a joint, and I'd be like, oh, I can do that, or let me try that, and then I'd be off and running again. It took me 10 years to get a year, legit. Did you have any of that? When you were kind of one foot in, and then you're like, I'm not ready.
One time when my son was 8 months old, I tried to get sober, lasted 28 days, and then I didn't try again after that.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
What's the mission behind JSL Recovery?
Yeah, so JSL Recovery is...
By the way, how new is this?
It's brand new. It's been in the works for a while, but it is brand new. JSL Recovery is an outpatient treatment center. So what I found over the years working in a clinical space is that Most programs are like 90 days or less. And then, you're supposed to just go out there and like figure out life. Right. And like, I think it takes a solid like year to really do some good work, have that time to take care of yourself, and figure out who you are and what you want out of life. And so, this is an outpatient setting that people would come to after they went through detox residential. So they would come and they would do programming hours at my center and then, live at sober living if they wanted to. But the whole concept is to provide a safe, supportive, welcoming environment where people can really immerse themselves in a culture of individuals like me that are on fire for recovery, and be part of a community and do all the work you need to do while building relationships, while learning what you like to do, while finding your purpose, while exploring different hobbies, activities, and just be a safe place for people to come in the community and, get the help they need long-term.
So what do you like? You literally are with what you're talking about, this recovery, JSL recovery, and then you're just on the front lines. I see, like, since I started following you, like, I forget how you came across, but like it was maybe the sober motivation dude. I forget. But anyways, I saw one of your posts and you were like, literally, I forget what it was, but you were like fentanyl. I was like, wow, because I think that is something that's, it's killing people all the time. And it's not nowhere near in the conversation like it needs to be. What have you seen with that epidemic so far, trying to be there and fight it?
Yeah, it's one of the things I'm very passionate about. And unfortunately, fentanyl is not going away anytime soon. And being in the business that I'm in, I'm constantly hearing about people dying. There is no using drugs recreationally anymore.
Yeah.
Fentanyl had been around probably when both of us were using, we'd both be dead right now. There's no way we'd be here. So I think, the best thing that we can do is spread awareness and educate. And so, I try to educate and spread awareness, and also help out with harm reduction, like Narcan, get it in people's hands so they can have that in case, somebody do see someone that's overdosing. But I really want to try to go into schools. It's one thing I want to do in the future, even down to like middle schools, not even high schools, middle schools, where they start experimenting with things, and tell my story and talk to them about the dangers and risks of fentanyl, because I think a lot of people just don't know, or they don't think it's going to be them. These kids with these weed pens, it's like all these things now that you wouldn't think has fentanyl. And I know a mom that lost her 13-year-old son from hitting a weed pen, and there was fentanyl in it, and he died. I talked to 2 people in the last less than 2 weeks that had a loved one die from fentanyl. We call it fentanyl poisoning now because it is poisoning. It's a weapon of mass destruction. It's killing 300 people a day, and it's like someone had once said this to me, and I say it now, and hopefully people will carry that message. It's like, if you put it into a visual, if 300 people a day, that's an airplane going down every day. And if an airplane went down in the United States every single day for a week, what would happen? There'd be drastic change that would happen. Intervention, getting into solution. What do we need to do? And I could go down a big rabbit hole with big pharma and what's going on here, but nonetheless, it's here, right? So what can we do? We can educate and we can get loud about it. So that's where I'm saying.
Yeah, well, it's cool. As a son, it's cool what you're doing. As a mom, how do you, like, moms listen to this, right? And like, so what's your connection? What's your message to your son about this? Because, we're talking about a minefield now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I live my life very openly. So because of what I do and being in recovery, he feels very open to talk to me. And so I have the conversation with him often. There is nothing left unsaid between the two of us. And I think a lot of parents are scared to talk to their children. There's still this stigma, right? That we talk about this space where it's like, ooh, well, if we're talking to them about it, or if we're giving them Narcan, or, ooh, that's pretty much like giving them permission to do it. It's like, just being blatantly honest, I got my son's drawer full of condoms because I'm like, listen, I don't want you having sex, but you're in 10th grade, it's going to happen, and like, use it. You know what I mean? And it's the same thing. Like, unfortunately, most kids are going to experiment. So would you rather educate your kid or have them walk into it not knowing and then not feel safe to talk to you about it. Like, we need to be talking openly about these things with our children.
What's the thing you would tell a young woman or a young man or anybody, actually, doesn't matter how old they are, and they come to you, they're like, Jennifer, how do I'm hopeless. I can't stop. You know, what's your message?
Well, there has to be that surrender. You know, there has to be that point in your life that you're just so sick of being sick and tired that you're willing to surrender 100% and make a change. And to know that's the strongest thing you could do. You know, for so long, I thought it was a weakness of mine to have to ask for help. And it's really the strongest thing that you could possibly do. And once you do get to that spot and you can actually ask for help and actually talk to other people, it's like a huge weight just comes off of your shoulders. You know, you have to just trust the process. You have to trust the process. If you can see millions of us doing this and living these amazing lives, then you can do it too. You know, it's just really surrendering, trust the process, get that help, and surround yourself with like-minded people that lift you up.
So anything else? Anything I left out? You said you had questions for me. Any questions?
Oh, I was just like, where are you shooting this at?
So I'm in a studio in Central Texas. So right between Dallas and Austin. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay, cool. And why did you start the podcast?
Well, I got sober like about 11 years ago. And I got sober because of people like you and maybe me, like people that were sober out loud that had a voice and a platform. And so I'd always kind of told myself, if I get out there enough or have a real platform, like I'm going to start a podcast. You know, I'm going to carry the message. And my brother was in recovery. He just passed away. He lived in California. He died of cancer just recently. I was talking to you about him.
Yeah.
I called him. I was like, you know, because there's traditions and all this stuff, you know, with AA. So I was a little intimidated by that. I was like, Kev, what do I do? Like, he was like, do it. He's like, we need people out there talking about it. And so that was like 3 years ago. And I'll interview just like anybody. Nobody's anybody, but you know what I mean. But it's also cool, to have people like you who are notable, who are, it's like, oh, wow, like here's Jennifer talking about it, or wow, here's Ryan Leaf talking about it, or wow, here's Doug Overton, like people that people know. So that relatability, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a huge deal.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's one of the main things.
Okay. I appreciate you so much. I'm going through like a rough day. So it was great to like I was talking to you earlier, like to realize my purpose, you know? So I appreciate it. Thanks so much for listening to the Payoff with Pete. Once again, I'm Pete Souza. And of course, we are part of the Rogue Media Network. All kinds of good podcasts you can find at roguemedianetwork.com. And of course, you can find this podcast and all those other ones wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, other spots like that.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.